Can the government censor a publication before it's even printed? To find out, you have to read Neer versus Minnesota, but it's 23 pages. Don't have time for that? I've got you covered. This is TLDR, where normally I cover New York Court of Appeals cases in 5 minutes or less. But this is part of a special series I'm doing on landmark cases. This episode is all about Neer versus Minnesota, with a citation of 283 U.S. 697. This monumental case was published by the United States Supreme Court on June 1st, 1931. The crux of this case: prior restraint on publication. Now, let's dive into the background law that helps understand this case. To fully understand Neer versus Minnesota, we need to talk about the First Amendment. It's the backbone of American free speech, granting us the right to express ourselves without government interference. Part of this is the freedom of the press, allowing media to report without fear. A publisher can be sued for defamation and have to pay for their harm. But that's a delicate balance. Freedom of speech versus risk of harm to the public. With that context, let's look at the facts of the case. The Neer versus Minnesota case began with a scandalous publication. J.M. Neer, the publisher of a tabloid called the Saturday Press, had a penchant for controversy. In his publication, Neer launched scathing attacks on public officials, accusing them of being involved in gang activities, which he claimed were rampant in Minneapolis. His words, however, stirred the hornet's nest. The local government, under the Minnesota Public Nuisance Law, deemed Neer's publication defamatory and scandalous, and a nuisance to public peace and safety. They used a local law to halt its circulation, effectively muzzling Neer's voice. This was a classic confrontation between a free press and government censorship. Mr. Neer felt his First Amendment rights were violated. He challenged the injunction, arguing that the Minnesota law allowing the injunction constituted an unconstitutional violation of the First Amendment. That brings us to the procedural history of the case. Not one to back down, Neer appealed the decision. The case moved up the ranks, landing in the Minnesota Supreme Court. Here, the lower court's decision was upheld, reinforcing the law's power to suppress publications deemed offensive or malicious. With the state Supreme Court's decision not in his favor, Neer took the matter to the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court. It was here that the case would make history, challenging the very essence of the First Amendment, the freedom of the press. The Supreme Court's decision in Neer versus Minnesota was groundbreaking. The court held that the government cannot censor or otherwise prohibit a publication in advance, even though the communication might be punishable after publication. This principle, known as prior restraint, was deemed unconstitutional by the court. The majority opinion, penned by Chief Justice Hughes, was grounded in the belief that the freedom of the press, protected by the First Amendment, was among the most precious of liberties. The court reasoned that this freedom was essential for the dissemination of ideas and opinions, and that it could only be curtailed under exceptional circumstances, such as in wartime. Justice Butler, however, dissented. He argued that the Minnesota law was a reasonable restriction on press freedom, designed to maintain peace and good order. This difference in opinion laid the groundwork for future debates on the balance between freedom of the press and societal order. But what does this decision mean for us today? The impact of Neer versus Minnesota is still felt today. This landmark case marked a pivotal turn in the interpretation of the First Amendment, reinforcing the concept of freedom of the press. It set a precedent limiting the government's ability to censor or prevent the publication of materials, a concept known as prior restraint. This ruling has been instrumental in shaping future decisions related to media freedom, ensuring that the press remains a robust check on government power. It has also influenced global norms, inspiring other democracies to adopt similar protections for their press. And that's Near versus Minnesota in 5 minutes or less. Stay tuned for more landmark cases in our special series. If you like what you just saw and want to see more just like it, please hit like or subscribe to let me know.